a high growth of 9.1% in 21-22 and then again 7.2% in 22-23. So the trajectory of Indian economy has become very, very strong in the post-pandemic years. Give a big hand to our economists and our policymakers, Shri Sanjeev Singh ji, our chief guest, who is planning many policies in the Niti Aayog, and our guest, Abhik Barua ji. He is providing time to time many opinions on the economy, TK of course, known figure throughout the world, providing so many connotations on the economic developments, and legacy of all these speakers. We welcome you all, sir, and strong. And during the last 2 years, we were the fastest moving exporter also among the top 20 exporters. Give a big hand to the policy environment provided by the Government of India and the many policy makers. Public finance and policy. Let's give to them.
Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, and friends from the media, Namaskar, very good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for being here on Tuesday. I'm sure you've all taken out some precious time to be here. It means a lot to us. On behalf of the PhD Chamber of Commerce, Industry and Family, I'm honored to welcome you to the conference, Geopolitical Spillovers and Resilience of the Indian Economy. Again, cannot thank you enough for being here today. Thank you so much to the guests and the panelists for being here. Today's theme is both timely and pivotal. After decades dominated by globalization and geoeconomics, the world is now confronting escalating geopolitical risks due to the numerous conflicts that are going. We are witnessing a dramatic reorganization of the global structure and relationships, spurred by accumulating shocks such as the COVID-19 pandemic, the conflict in Russia and Ukraine, and the recent Israel-Gaza war. These conflicts have led to a fragmentation of global economic relationships, affecting macroeconomic stability and widening growth divergences across various regions. We're observing a prevalent rise in inflation, a disruption in value chains, exemplified by extreme food costs and a significant escalation in inflation. Whether this inflation will remain is under control is to be seen. Looking ahead to 2024, the economic landscape is marked by considerable uncertainty. Of course, we have elections next year, we have elections coming up in the US, we have ongoing geopolitical tensions, we have mounting debt and widespread economic fragility. Despite this, India is projected to grow by more than 6% on average for the next 5 years, whereas China is expected to grow less than 4%. The top 10 economies are also projected to grow by less than 2%. Global growth, which was at 6% in 2021, is expected to decelerate to 3.5% in 2022, 3% in 2023, and 2.9% in 2024. Now, despite this growing pessimism for the global landscape, the Indian economy has demonstrated remarkable resilience, capable of recovering from unprecedented challenges. The fundamentals have strengthened thanks to various effective reforms taken by the government over the last decade, ranging from the Make in India scheme to the various startups, to Atmanirbhar Bharat, to the recent PLI scheme. These reforms have fortified the growth trajectory of the Indian economy and expanded the financial landscape. The Sensex has also reached an all-time high, crossing the 71,000 mark. Yet the POFA indicator, which measures the market cap to GDP ratio, is around 110% in India compared to the US, which is 172.7%, showing that there's definitely room for growth in the Indian equity markets. So with all of this, we look forward to an extremely engaging conversation between the panelists. We hope to learn a lot from you and deliberate on these issues. Once again, thank you all for coming and namaste.
Next 5 years, and India's growth is projected to be more than 6% in the next 5 years. That is the statistics provided by the International Monetary Fund recently in the month of October. Now China is behind us, and we are moving ahead with more and more reforms and hand-holding by the government, and becoming more and more lucrative in the global charts. Before starting the panel discussion, we would like to invite our chief guest, Shri Sanjeet Singh Ji, Senior Advisor Niti Aayog, for his keynote address. And before that, I would request our Executive Director, because he has to travel to Uttarakhand in the next 2-3 years, so I would request him for his a few minutes remarks on the Indian economy, how the economy is shaped by the so many domestic and global developments. Dr. Ranjit Mehta, please.
Chief Guest Shri Sanjeet Singh, Senior Advisor Niti Aayog, Guest of Honor Dr. R. Kavita Rao, Director, National Institute of Public Finance and Policy, Guest of Honor Shri Avik Barua Ji, Chief Economist and Executive Vice President, SDFC Bank, Dr. Nagesh Kumar, Director and Chief Executive, Institute for Studies in Industrial Development, Shri T.K. Arunji, ex-editor, Opinion, The Economic Times, and very good friend of ours, PhD CCI, thank you. And Professor Shiv Shankar Menon, Chair of the Ashoka Center for Chinese Studies, Ashoka University, Shri Shashwat Somani Ji, our very young, dynamic Chair of Economic Affairs Committee of PhD CCI, and Shri Chaitanya Singhania, Vice President, Business Development, JK Paper Limited, Dr. S.P. Sharma, Chief Economist and DSG, PhD CCI, members of the Managing Committee present here, my colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great pleasure to welcome you all. The resilience of Indian economy is such a great topic. And like in Chamber also, as India is getting younger, at Chamber also we have young leadership who is coming, and so is Mr. Shashwat Somani today. He is the youngest chair of our Economic Affairs Committee, and such a great topic in his tenure, the geopolitical spillovers and resilience of Indian economy. The most resilient economy is definitely Indian economy, which is evident from the fact that the way we have come out of one of the most unprecedented pandemic in 2020-21. When the world is still grappling with the consequences of the pandemic, India is already the fastest growing economy in the world. It is because of the 1.4 billion people that we have, the vibrant startup ecosystem, 65 million plus MSMEs in our country, very robust public infrastructure investment, and very robust financial system in our country. So we can see a lot of young people here. India is one of the most youngest economy which is having the most number of young people. Therefore, I think that after experiencing various challenges, including the recent geopolitical the challenges, India has actually taken the best advantage of these opportunities. India has seen it as an opportunity in the challenges. So this is the characteristics of Indian economy. I think the way we are growing, the kind of strength that we have with young population, great entrepreneurial ability, the tech talent, I think that there is no geopolitical system that can really destabilize Indian economy, what we have experienced recent past. So ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you all and looking forward to great ideas from such a distinguished panel that we have today. I request you to give a very loud round of applause for our very distinguished panel, because when you go from here today, I am sure that you will be more, you will have better information, you will go more, you will be more aware about the things, and I am sure that this will help you in the times to come. With this, thank you very much.
Appointed by the Government of India and various think tanks and the policy makers. So thank you very much, and now we invite our keynote speaker, Shri Sanjeet Singh ji.
Mr. Somani, Mr. Rajit Mehta, Mr. Sharma, Dr. Kavita Rao, Dr. Nagesh Kumar, Mr. Big Barua, Mr. Arun, Professor Shiv Shankar Menon, who I've known in a different avatar earlier, and Meghna, and I also see a lot of familiar faces in the audience. So, good morning to everybody, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, many congratulations to PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry for organizing this very important conference on the geopolitical spillovers and the resilience of Indian economy, and getting together a stellar panel of speakers who will be able to contribute, who are all in fact authorities in their own respective fields, to be able to share this discussion today. So I consider myself very fortunate, one, to be able to receive a lot of good ideas which will emerge from this conference, and second, for this opportunity which PhD Chamber has given me to share my own thoughts at this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Prime Minister, when he addressed the nation from the rampart of the Red Fort on the 76th Independence Day in 2022, had set forth Panch Pran, 5 pledges for the coming 25 years of our country's Amrit Kal, the period which will lead up to the 100th anniversary of India's independence. And the first of the Panch Pran was the goal of developed India, or Vikasit Bharat. Now the Prime Minister has referred to it on various occasions, and in fact on December 11, just about last week, and a lot of young people here who may have already heard that address, which was an event which was anchored at Niti Aayog, which I represent. The Prime Minister had launched Vikasit Bharat at 2047, Voice of the Youth. And as my previous speaker, Rajitji, had mentioned, that the Prime Minister is leading the nation in recognizing the power of youth in this country, and the power of youth to lead the country in the Amrit Kal. And with this, the Vikasit Bharat 2047, Voice of the Youth, was launched. Now, in this speech, which was done just last week, the PM had said, this is the period in the history of India when the country is going to take a quantum leap. And then he had said, for India, this is the time, right time. In fact, I think it's more effective to quote the Prime Minister. He said, "Yahi samay hai, yahi sahi samay hai." Now, why are we talking about this this moment of India, this India moment? And what is this Viksit Bharat which we speak about? Viksit Bharat, very briefly, is a vision of India which rapidly develops in an inclusive and sustainable manner, leaving no one behind. It is a vision of India with a reduced import dependence, enjoying energy independence, and well integrated in the global supply chains. And why do we speak of this India movement? Ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned very clearly, we are in an era which is marked by profound transformations in the global dynamics, and the Indian economy finds itself today in a nexus of significant forces of geopolitical spillover, which we are talking about, deglobalization, decarbonization, digitization, demographic changes, to just name a few. I would like to take up my allotted airtime to in fact touch upon briefly on these areas, and why I say that is because these are the direct subject with which we are dealing with at Niti Aayog and working with the Honorable Prime Minister's office to be able to generate this vision for India. And they have taken into account these changes which are not just temporary, they are there they're going to sustain for a long time. First is this concept of deglobalization. Deglobalization probably can be called slowglobalization or reglobalization or different names. But at the end of it, what does it mean? It says that amidst the escalating geopolitical tensions, we have seen the Russia-Ukraine crisis, now we are seeing the Israel-Hamas crisis, all of them have impacts. Along with it, we have trade barriers, protectionist measures, strategic realignments, and disrupted supply chains, shifting geopolitical alliances. And all of them are really goading India towards achieving the target of self-reliance, which itself has a lot of challenges and opportunities inbuilt in it. My previous speaker spoke about the IMF report, and which has very clearly indicated that we are going to be seeing a slowdown in the near future of the global economy. The advanced economies are going to slow down much faster and much sharper way than compared to the emerging economies. Amidst all this, not long ago, in September this year, India has showcased its diplomatic prowess and has successfully delivered the G20 New Delhi Leaders Declaration in September. Now, the G20 presidency has provided India, the world's largest democracy, an opportunity to be a critical part of not only the world economic order, but also global governance going forward. Now, this comes at a very opportune moment, when Indian economy has been projected as the fastest growing major economy in the world amid decelerating global growth. This has been acknowledged by, you pick up any analysis today, including maybe members of the distinguished panel which are today, they all have participated. Everybody acknowledges the fact that India is the bright spot. India is going to be the major driver of global growth. But this is amidst the challenges which we are seeing. Let me just quote two specific responses which India as a policy has generated in response to the geopolitical spillovers. First is India's sustained capex push. There's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of, well, some people say incentive to really easily get into spending money, what we call freebies or like many other countries have done. But India has sustained itself by reducing the revenue expenditure and enhancing the capex over not just 1 year, over a sustained period. In fact, the union budget of 23-24 saw an increased infrastructure investment by 33%. But the government allocated 10 lakh crores, which is about 3.3% of GDP, towards infra spend. And this is based on the confidence that this will lead to a large multiplier impact on growth and employment through this move. The threefold increase from 2019-20 has reaffirmed India's strategic commitment to leverage infrastructure for economic expansion and global challenges. Now we are looking at a buoyancy in the tax collections. Now, this has given rise to a very strong incentive for this push to perhaps not just be continued but be boosted. So are we looking at a larger allocation towards the infrastructure in the coming years? I'll leave it to the panel to discuss that. The second response which India has done is a concerted manufacturing push. India has long been known as the services center of the world, the service export center of the world. Now, despite an impressive growth, India's manufacturing sector still accounts for about 17% of India's GDP and about 2.8% of the global manufacturing. So if you compare it to, for example, advanced economies like the United States, which contributes about 18%, and China, 28%, we realize that we have a long way to go. But we have surely taken steps in the right direction. We are well set on the course on this road. And we are implementing various reforms that are focused on ease of doing business, improving logistics efficiency to bring out the cost of logistics in country, promoting sustainable and environmentally friendly practices, and providing direct incentives for investment through initiatives like the PLI, the production-linked incentives. These reforms are also aligned with India's China Plus One strategy, which seek to attract foreign businesses seeking to diversify their supply chains. I see we have Professor Shiv Shankar Menon on the dais, so I will not dwell too much on the India-China Plus factor. In fact, I will look to him to tell us more about it. Let me quickly move to the second important factor, decarbonization, which is impacting us. Now, the world is fast becoming aware of the fact that there is an urgent need to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees and slashing of greenhouse gases emissions in half by 2030 to reach our collective goal of net zero by 2070. At COP26, PM Mr. Modi had presented the Panchamrit, or the 5 nectar elements of India's climate action, which included our commitment to reach 500 gigawatts of non-fossil energy capacity by 2030, and 50% of our energy requirements will be met from renewable energy by 2030. These are very, very stiff targets, but we are well on this course. In fact, the COP28, which has recently concluded last week at Dubai, marked a turning point with a transition away from fossil fuels. This deal solidified India's leadership in this particular area. India's potential for green leadership is, of course, undeniable, and we are aiming to become a global hub for renewable batteries and green hydrogen. We talk about energy transition. In fact, everybody's talking about energy transition. It comes in different names, just energy transition or simply energy transition. Now, a couple of things we need to realize about energy transition. The world has seen energy transition before. We have moved from a particular kind of energy to a different kind of energy, and it has led to changes in the geopolitical power structure. The difference in the present energy transition, which the world is experiencing now, is that for India, energy consumption as well as the energy sources, both of these are simultaneously changing, and that also in a very, very disruptive manner. The second difference is that we need to realize that India's energy needs are still growing. Therefore, our legacy capacity in fossil fuels will not just disappear as we transition to the non-renewables. In fact, India's per capita energy consumption is likely to rise by about 60% and can go up to 1450 watts per day per capita in the coming decades. Now, with 2/3 of the incremental supply coming from renewable sources, this is also our determination. That is why it is in this context that we have to see how we fought and won the battle at the COP28. Now, what does this entail, this energy transition? What are the opportunities which holds for India? It estimates $750 billion in energy capex. This shift, it is estimated, that will save India $1.7 trillion in foreign exchange by 2070. It will also create a new demand for solutions such as electric vehicles, cold storage chains, green hydrogen powered trucks and buses, and these new opportunities will help India to place itself at a pole position in manufacturing batteries, electrolyzers, and green steel. So in that sense, it's a win-win for the environment, the economy, and of course the future. The second impact which this energy transition can have, that it can positively impact India's terms of trade. And it will eventually reduce headline inflation volatility as the imported energy share of GDP will decline. And the third direct impact which we are looking at of this energy transition is it will promise cheaper electricity bills, empower farmers, and cleaner planet. By 2050, solar power is expected to bring down the average cost of power supply from about 6.15 rupees per kilowatt hour to 5.25 rupees. While sustaining farmer practice could generate an additional 3,400 per hectare of income for the farmers. So in this sense, it's a win-win. Another area, in fact, I would like to listen to more from this panel is that while we are looking at the near future and probably a longer term future, but in the immediate present, we are still grappling with measures such as the European Union's CBAM, a carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is patently unfair, and it is targeting India's goods like iron, steel, aluminum, and cement. And this environmental policy, disguised as a trade measure, is something which we have to find an answer to. At the cost of taking up my last minute of my time, I would like to touch upon the third major imperative of this present geopolitical scenario, which is digitization. The world is digitizing and digitizing very fast. In fact, it said that digitization is no longer an option, it is a necessity. economies which are adept at maintaining efficient use of digital talent, effective regulation, and quick adoption of new technologies, or in fact they're called future-ready economies, they are the ones who will leapfrog. India has been quick to recognize this, and if we recognizing the transformative potential of digitization, through Digital India, we have grasped the initiative of driving India towards such a future-ready, knowledge-centric India. India has achieved a remarkable milestone with rapid adoption of digital identity, as nearly 90% of our population, or nearly 1.2 billion people, have enrolled in less than a decade towards our digital identity. We have 90 billion Aadhaar-based authentication, nearly 900 million internet subscribers, and 1.2 billion mobile subscribers, with nearly half in rural areas. Today, India records 11 times more digital payments compared to the United States and Europe, and 4 times more than what China does. The India Stack, a digital infrastructure, is transforming financial assets, allowing seamless transactions for millions in both formal and informal economies. Digital IDs reduce identity verification costs, while open access standards enable smooth transactions. Now, this shift towards digital payments, which has been facilitated by our India Stack, stabilizes incomes in rural areas and boosts sales in the informal sector, playing a crucial role in India's economic development. The success of this model provides valuable lessons for other market economies. In fact, this was a major push by India during the G20, where we could set this example before the global south. I just want to point out one last point, which is, while most tech innovations so far have come from the developed world, India's digital stack is a model built by India for India. And it has the potential to change the lives of citizens in many countries which are placed in a similar footing as India. India, in fact, is the only country where PhonePe competes with Google Pay, and Paytm is competing with WhatsApp. Of course, there is room for much more to be done in terms of digital services that can bring in better inclusion, access and training, especially to the remote areas. We have a lot of work to do, it's true. But Digital India is really transforming the way and helping India leapfrog over a large, big gap which existed so far. Last but not the least, we are increasingly taking pole position in setting standards. The GPAI, or the Global Partnership on Artificial Intelligence, which has recently concluded, in fact last week at Delhi, it led by building a consensus among the GPAI members on advancing safe, secure and trustworthy AI, and commitment to supporting sustainability of GPAI projects. So India's position as the main player in AI was once again reaffirmed, and the Prime Minister made a clarion call to work together to prepare a global framework for ethical use of AI. Why I point this out is, increasingly, instead of India playing catch-up, India is now leading from the front, sitting on the main table, sitting on the discussion table, setting the standards. This is a major transformation which is also taking place, and this is the response of India to this new changing paradigms. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for all your time, and I leave this to you for a discussion that truly India's time has come. Thank you so much.
Come and India is becoming more and more prominent and strong each day, and definitely we are going to become a strong economy in the coming times, and a developed economy by 2047, as projected by many economists, that we will be 5 trillion, 10 trillion and even 20 trillion and 30 trillion and $35 trillion economy by 2047, when we will complete our 100 years of independence. We have great economists and experts with us. Shri Sanjeev Singh, he is a senior advisor, already spoken. He is a senior advisor with National Institution for Transforming India, NITI Aayog. He looks at policy issues related to trade and commerce, as well as economic, finance and disinvestment related issues. He is also the coordinator for NITI Aayog for India's G20 presidency related matters. Then we have Shri Abhi Barwaji, Chief Economist and Senior Executive Vice President of the HDFC Bank. He has been in the financial sector for 30 years now. He has been earlier with CRISIL, Merrill Lynch and SSKI Securities. His previous assignment was as Chief Economist, ABN AMRO Bank. He has been on a number of consultative committees of the Planning Commission, Niti Aayog and the RBI. Then we have Dr. Kavita Rao. She is Director, National Institute for Public Finance and Policy, New Delhi. Prior to being the director, she was a professor at NIPP, leading work on tax policy and assessment of its impact. Her areas of research interest are emerging ideas on the role of state in developing countries, understanding taxpayers' perceptions regarding tax compliances, GST, compensation for revenue loss and state finances. Dr. Rao holds a PhD in economics from the Indian Statistical Institute.
We have seen, whether it has been the Iran sanctions, the Russia-Ukraine conflict or the Middle East conflict, in recent years we are seeing a deeper engagement with the US in terms of defense ties, that there is a definite shift. How do you look at all of this in terms of ties with various countries in defense sector plus defense expenditure amid all these geopolitical spillovers? There is no time limit, but you can be brief.
First of all, I would like to compliment PhDCCI for choosing such a topic, because geopolitics doesn't often occur to industrialists. It doesn't occur to a political class also as something that matters. When India signed the Indo-US nuclear deal in 2008, a very tiny segment of the political class and the business class actually understood the significance of this. Many people opposed it, including our Honorable Prime Minister. So it is very welcome that you have organized a discussion on the important significance of geopolitics on the economy. We have the Red Sea being blocked today because of the problems with the Houthis bombing passing ships, and that's a direct fallout of the Israel-Gaza conflict. So we understand these things matter. But let's be clear, this is a minor sideshow. The basic dynamic in geopolitics right now is defined by the competition between the US and China. And this is something that matters immensely to India. During the classic Cold War, when the superpowers were the Soviet Union and the United States, India cleverly played one of the against the other, wresting concessions from both sides, and we managed to grow economically, maintain our strategic autonomy, and we did a reasonably good job. Today, when the competition is between the US and China, we don't have that flexibility. We cannot try to get concession from China, who shares our longest border and has hostile intentions on a part of our territory. If China and the US are locked in a purely direct hegemonic competition, then we become kind of subservient to the US, because we need US support to stand up against China. So we desperately need to have a multipolar world rather than a bipolar world, which is divided between China and the US. This, I believe, to my understanding, is one key reason why, in spite of being a member of the anti-China AUKUS, the Quad, in spite of being increasingly wooed by the Americans, India refused to side with the US and the West in Ukraine. It is to our interest for Russia to continue to be a salient global power. It is in our interest for Russia to have access to its warm water port in Crimea. To say that Russia should be stripped of its naval fleet, the base in the only viable warm water region, because that is part of Ukraine, is not something that makes sense to anybody. But if you look at the commentary in the media, discussions on Ukraine, you will hardly find anybody mention the fact that the crucial deciding factor is that Russia needs to have continued access to its warm water naval fleet. And the access to that goes through eastern Ukraine, unless you have a bridge over the sea. And that eastern Ukraine has to be free for travel by Russia. So the moment Ukraine became part of the Western camp, Russia annexed Crimea. And when he started seriously talking about joining NATO, then Putin decided to ensure that they will have access to Crimea by annexing eastern Ukraine. Now this matters. This is the geopolitical battle in which the US is trying to drain Russia and erode its status as a global power by conveniently harming the Ukrainians, conveniently letting Ukrainians and Russians fight and die. So there is not a single body bag coming back from the Ukraine front back to the US to create a political tension domestically. You just need to give some money. How does it matter to us? After the pandemic, when the global economy was recovering, this war plunged the entire world into an economic slowdown, severe slowdown, stagnation, and that has destroyed options for countries like India. Now, this is not just a question of China plus one strategy. Today we see the US trying to choke China's access to key electronic components, particularly the most advanced chips, microprocessors required for artificial intelligence. Let's be clear, we might talk big on strategic achievements and potential and all that. We are minnows when it comes to artificial intelligence, quantum computing, quantum communications, and these are not things that can be rectified overnight. It needs sustained, consistent application, allocation of manpower, policy resources, and financial resources. And unless the industrial class in India appreciates the significance of this and supports the government when it does these things, both in terms of general support and in terms of investing in these areas yourself, India will not be able to retain the strategic autonomy that you have built up so carefully after independence. If, vital chip making industries are not allowed to sell their chips to China, then China has to develop its own chips, which it has. Huawei's latest phone employs the 7 nanometer microchip because Chinese are able to build this. We are trying to get various Western companies to come and set up chip making plants in India, and the best offer we had was 22 nanometer chip. This is neither here nor there. It's not enough for us to actually have chips being manufactured in India. These must be owned, their intellectual property must be owned by India. Nobody should be in a position to shut off Indian access to these chips when we need them. If we have vital chips in our missiles, and if a war breaks out and we need parts and replacement, if that supply is cut off, then where are we? So we need indigenous capability, not just in chip manufacture, but in chip design. Having Intel and AMD, etc., come and manufacture chips here is good for our balance of payments. We will not have to spend so much of money importing these chips, that's all. It doesn't ensure our strategic autonomy. And for that, there is a lot of industry can do. Tiny Israel is a powerful player in the technology space. Some Silicon Valley startups, like Anduril, Palantir, they will shape the nature of war capability going forward. And they are just IT companies. You are supposed to be strong, right? Palantir offers what they call dominance in decision making. It is capable of sourcing information from very many different quarters, analyzing them real time, and providing actionable inputs. It might be to telling drones where to strike. It might be telling where your material will come from. But that's a very vital capability. So let's be clear, there is much that Indian industry can do to allow India to retain its strategic autonomy, which is the only thing that will allow Indian industry to grow as it wants to, without being constrained by external preferences. I would like just to add, while there is geopolitical competition and tension, there is also the compulsion to cooperate. There are some problems which can be tackled only through cooperation. Climate change, for example, or advanced nuclear fusion technologies. Even in the midst of the Ukraine war, when the West had boycotted practically everything from Russia, Russia supplied a magnet for the international thermonuclear experimental reactor being built in France.
This is my request that you as an industrial chamber to play a larger role in sensitizing industry on what is stake and what get. Thank you.
You did mention about the recent crisis that is unfurling in the Red Sea. I would like to bring Mr. Singh over there. We are seeing shipments being attacked, and a lot of global companies have stopped their shipments from the Suez Canal, which is a very crucial trade route, in fact, especially for the oil trade. Recently, we saw the British oil and gas major BP also announcing that it is halting its shipments from the Suez Canal. Can it have any spillover impact on India as far as the global crude oil prices volatility is concerned, or the export-import trade is concerned?
The Red Sea story seemed to be unfolding in very interesting ways. My limited sense, since I don't work so much in that space, is there are enough globally there are enough countries who are interested in keeping that communication channel open, which effectively means there will be more naval presence of different countries in that space. It contributes to enhanced costs of using the route, and those costs are definitely going to be passed on to the countries and therefore to the users of all the exports and imports. But do we see trade stopping? Not significantly in the near future. Do we see petroleum prices being hit? There is a possibility. And for us, petroleum is a sensitive sector, so we need to worry about it. But once again, we have sort of diversified our petroleum sourcing, and therefore some risks the country now feels capable of dealing with. The price of crude is not yet being forecasted to skyrocket, and if the slowdown that the IMF, the World Bank, and everybody is forecasting for the next year or so actually kicks in, then that provides a counter pressure to any increase in petroleum prices. The third element in that overall story for India is that this union government continues to collect significant amount of cess on petrol and diesel. So there is a reasonable amount of cushion available for the government to act in case crude oil prices go up. That will result in some fiscal stress because those are resources currently being used for other purposes. But if the impact of inflation becomes substantial, the government does have elbow room to work, and that's a source of comfort to us. I just want to add further that if we are looking at the excise duty collections from petroleum this year, they're sort of flat. So we still hope to collect about 3 lakh crores from the sector. And so that does provide us with some cushion to protect. The other part of the inflation story, I guess, is the Reserve Bank of India working its way through the interest rate cycle. We expect the bank to start easing up a little bit in another 6 months or so. If that happens and the monetary transmission works out in reasonable time, you might see a step up reversion of interest rates and therefore cost of capital. And then and only then will we create domestic pressures for the prices to go up. But until then, I think things are well taken care of.
Mr. Menon, you have any thoughts on that? Any impact on the global crude oil prices you see because of this Red Sea crisis unfolding?
I'm no expert on economics. In fact, I'm surprised to be here with such distinguished economists.
But do you see the prices moderating?
If you look at the last 3 years or so, we've had several predictions of oil prices going through the roof. Hasn't happened. Red Sea is closed off, $2. That's it. And we're still hovering around $80, plus minus. All the predictions we've heard in the last 3 years have got wrong. Last year at this time, everyone was saying recession. We're still waiting for that. This year we're saying slowdown with great confidence. I'm not so sure. I think you've just heard an analysis of why there is sufficient resilience actually, in our system at least. And frankly, the oil that we get from the Middle East comes to us eastwards. It doesn't go through the Red Sea. And that's not really our problem. No, for me, I want to go back to what Mr. Arun was saying actually, which is the key is really what happens between the US and China. And as he said rightly, this is not another Cold War. They are not like the Soviet Union and the US. So we can't do what we did during the Cold War. They are part of one economic system. And it's still basically an American-led economic system because financing is still under the US control. So in geopolitical terms, you have a very strange world. China and the US are part of really one global economy. They're tied they're like Siamese twins, they're joined at the hip. They cannot separate or decouple economically without doing substantial damage to themselves. So if you look at decoupling, there was a lot of fear of decoupling 3 years ago, 2 years ago. What have they actually done? It's confined to strategic sectors and high technology. And even there, they're trying to draw at least a basis below which the relationship won't fall. And I think we have to remember that they have a common interest in preventing anybody else from rising. That please don't forget. So 10 years ago, Xi Jinping used to tell Chinese that the more China rises, the more opposition we will face. And he was absolutely right. But I think we should also learn that lesson. We're lucky so far. I've had Chinese friends who, over the last 30 years, every 5 years they ask me, why does the world object to China's rise and not to India's? Now, I can't tell them the truth, which is because we are not assertive and aggressive the way you are. We don't build intercontinental missiles to hit Washington. You do. That may be the truth. But the fact is that we've slipstreamed behind China's rise. But today you've got to a situation where it's shifted, and you can see the difference in the way the world reacts to us. You can see all the noise that is made now about what we are alleged to have done abroad, right? And so I think we need to be a little conscious of what we're doing here. The answer, of course, is our own strength, and for that, we have to come back to you. Ultimately, it's what you, industry, do in India that gives us the strength to deal with this. But let's not fall back into old habits, like the Cold War. You look at it, US and China are not fighting proxy wars the way the Soviet Union and the US did. They are not separated, they're not running separate economic systems. China still respects US sanctions on Russia, at least the letter. What she does under the table is a different issue. They don't have two separate institutionalized alliance structures, Warsaw Pact and NATO. And they don't offer an ideological alternative. After all, this is still state capitalism that is what China is building. So for me, really watch China's growth, see how far they slow down. They are really nervous that what happened to the other East Asian miracle economies will happen to them. If you look at Japan, Korea, Taiwan, they all grew fantastic 30, 40 years, and then they had a painful economic adjustment, but more than that, they also had a political reconsideration. Japan, the LDP lost their monopoly on power. Taiwan and Korea became democracies. That's the last thing the CCP wants in China. What is Xi Jinping doing? He's going the opposite direction. He's increasing the role of the state in the economy. He's increasing the surveillance state. He's making it a hard state. He's trying to avoid the fate that he saw happening around him. And that's going to have huge economic impact on the rest of us, because today over half of Asia's GDP is just India and China. So economic power has got concentrated, military power has got diffused, and you have a world where the world is multipolar economically, and there's three big blocks, which you know about. But militarily, there's only one global superpower. Only the US can project military power where she wants, when she wants, around the globe. Not China, not anybody else. Everybody else is a regional power in military terms. And politically, we're all confused, thoroughly. Let's face it. And politics is local. So you have a strange world here where the only people you can rely on are yourselves. You can't rely on anybody else, either whether it's the US, the Chinese, whoever. So you're back to strategic autonomy, but in a different situation where you therefore work with every possible element. Sorry, I've gone on too long.
No worries.
But you're too polite.
I think it's, despite the fact that China is slowing down, it has long-term problems of a flailing property sector, adverse demographic trends, and consequently, and slowing growth on a much higher per capita income than ours. I think it would be dangerous to underestimate China's capacity as an economic power. I think it has moved up the value chain quite considerably, and its research capabilities are absolutely fantastic. And if you just see, I was looking at a survey of Chinese universities and papers written in peer-reviewed journals, STEM journals, coming out of Chinese universities. I think the major Chinese universities like Tsinghua and so forth have more papers in than all the American universities, all the European universities put together. So I think we are perhaps not really competing, and I want to sort of get away from strategic imperatives, but looking at the more sort of hard economic issues of employment and so forth. And the question is that, should we do another kind of China in its early phases? Is it possible to do it? I think that's a live debate. But do we really need to do that, or are we really competing with the likes of, Vietnam, Cambodia, and so forth? And there, I think there is an issue, and there is. I'm sure the PLI scheme helps industrialists, but there are harder constraints that industry faces. There's been progress on physical infrastructure, but on software infrastructure, particularly in relation to skills, availability of skilled labor, there is still a huge problem which we need to sort of address. So I think we need to frame our, on the one hand, we sort of heard about the strategic imperatives that industry should be concerned about. Maybe they can't do much about it immediately, but that is sort of the overarching picture, or the overarching sort of umbrella under which it operates. But in terms of hard competition, let's figure out who we are competing with. And this is not a new story. This is not a post-COVID thing. FDI was going out of China over a long period of time, and the Chinese were not particularly bothered because they were moving up the value chain. And a lot of it went to Vietnam, some of it went to Cambodia, and finally, I think this entire business of near-shoring and friend-shoring, etc. We do have competition from Latin America. I think Mexico is a big competitor. The other, Brazil and so forth are doing very well. If you look at, I look at the currency market, the Colombian peso has done extremely well. I don't know whether it's an indicator of the fact that there is some reshoring to Colombia. But I think, yes, we've done very well on some of the hard infrastructure factors, but I think there are critical things which remain, and I think that these lie largely in the domain of education and skilling, of public health, which I think ultimately affects the quality of the workforce. And there we are, I think, still, I think industry needs to talk to government about their needs, what exactly can work, whether it's an apprenticeship or you know, a more focused skilling. There are some success stories which are coming out of the government's efforts. But I think that's a new frontier that needs to be crossed.
Trying to transition to the renewable energy, we are seeing energy. Dr. Kumar, would you like to comment over there?
What TK said earlier is very timely discussion, the changing geopolitics and what it means for India. I think Mr. Palwa already mentioned about the restructuring helping us or not. And I think immediately, of course, you see that Vietnam, Mexico certainly grabbing a lot of the restructured supply chains or value chains, which are shifting or thinking not decoupling from China, but diversifying their resource bases, or you know, so that when there is a disruption next time around, they are not stuck. So in that context, India certainly is a very promising destination. As of now, I think there is a lot of attention on Vietnam and Mexico, as Mr. Barwa was saying. So for one thing, you know, they have both Vietnam and Mexico enjoy trade preferences. You know, Vietnam with EU, Mexico is a part of the trilateral North American Free Trade Agreement. So they get that advantage. But India, on the other hand, has, you know, deeper labor markets and sort of infinite supply of labor, abundant, but we need to invest in raising or improving the quality of that labor. I mean, it is as of now, I think quality of our labor remains poor. That needs to be fixed. So what I would say is that there is a huge potential, because my feeling is that Vietnam, being a small economy, will saturate very quickly, and it can never become another China. So only India has that potential of becoming another China if we get our act together. So investing in human resources and preparing for IR 4.0, the industrial revolution or digital revolution, generating more and rapidly a bigger number of people trained in AI, ML and all that. But the potential is also indicated by the fact that things have begun to happen. And if you look at the surveys conducted by JETRO or European, JETRO among the Japanese companies, there was another survey I was looking at of European companies. All of them indicate now India is the country that they are looking at for future investments. And in the recent past, in last 1 year, since September 22 onwards, for instance, India has been exporting mobile phone of $1 billion plus every month. And now one would say that this is all based on very shallow assembly. But electronics industry starts that way. I mean, you begin with the assembling, scale up volumes, and then the vendors, component manufacturers come in to increase the value addition. So I think the way it has shaped up, first of all, it has created a lot of jobs in shallow assembly, whatever it is. And because the scales have now been built, the deepening of production also seems to be happening. You heard a few weeks ago, or maybe last week, TDK setting a production unit in India to make batteries for the iPhones. Then, one by one, all of these different Corning Glass is setting up this glass factory which goes on in our mobile phones. So gradually, in next few years, I think the deepening of production will happen. Not only just in this electronics manufacturing, but photovoltaic and all other green industries. Batteries is a very big issue, which is currently constrained by lithium becoming a critical raw material. But now the new technology, sodium-ion batteries, is what we should focus on, because we do not have access to these very critical materials in the same manner as China does. So I think all of the sort of indicators are that India is poised for playing a very big and major role in supply chains in the future. But as of now, it is a work in progress. We need to do really a lot on fixing our human resource development.
India is not anymore hyphenated with China. Right? We are not obsessed with China. Right? We have our own challenges with it. So let's be very clear about that part. India's story is a unique story. Why? Because our challenges are very unique. So while it's true that China is right there, China is right next to us, so is the other large economies. But also you cannot deny the fact that India, China and US are destined to be the three largest economies in the very near future. India is going to be there. India is the world's largest population country of 1.4 billion. It has the largest youth power, you cannot deny that. The dividend will come. It's true. We have the skill. We have to work on health. So the first point I want to make was that it is a uniquely India story and will continue to be an India story. It cannot be any other. Can we copy China's model? Please think about it. China was never a democracy. And this brings to a very important point. India has been a democracy for the past 76 years. Long back when I was in college, sir, somebody pointed out that if you draw a line from Israel down to Indonesia, all the nations which have become independent at the same time, the only country which has remained democratic is India. Not a single other country has a more democracy throughout the past 75 years. India has. We can be proud of the fact. Can you imagine a leading economy of the world, the top 3 economy we will have India, a solidly democratic country. Again, look back at the immediate past 25 years, 5 stable governments. They have completed their entire 5-year terms. And we are looking at in the next 10 years perhaps also in a similar stable manner. This is a democratic dividend we have. This is not something which China has. Or therefore we cannot even compare. Today, India, we have recently launched a multi-dimensional poverty index study that went quite unnoticed in all this debate. 13.5 crore people have exited the poverty line, have raised them above the poverty line. This is the challenge uniquely to India, and we are working towards that. Our obsession is not so much that whether we will be able to catch up with China very soon. Our obsession right now is how do we ensure that our people exit the poverty line, are able to have roti, kapda, makan, and much more. That is the challenge which India is. So we are basically challenging our own problems, and we are winning on that. That is the focus of India right now. How do we create the next 10 million jobs? So our focus is on that. It's true, we have Vietnam and Cambodia. We recently have done a study at Niti Aayog to try to understand if there's a recession in the world, which are the countries which are going to stop, the imports are going to reduce from which countries. We have identified them. And guess what? We have done a reverse. We have gone down to say which states in India are going to get hit. So we are talking to those states. We're telling them, look, your apparel and textile are going to get hit. Be prepared. This is what you can do. We are working with them, working strategies along with them. Why? Because we are very aware that India is made up of states. And our people reside in states and districts. So those districts and states have to grow. So as being a democracy, we are working along with all our subnational units. That is unique to India. There is something which we have to work on, which we are working on. So I just wanted to point out that these are a few imperatives. What was mentioned was solar and UPI. These two stories if you take, these are again uniquely Indian. Solar, as I mentioned in my opening remarks also, is a necessity for us. We cannot, like Madam mentioned so beautifully, that that the challenges which we are going to face. Same with the UPI story. No other country has replicated this UPI story. They didn't need to. India does. We have been able to reach 1.2 billion people through our technology. Direct benefit transfer scheme is something which is unique to India. We are exporting it to the developing world. So all this I wanted to just point out. Please understand, the point is that India and Indian policy is right now focused on uniquely Indian solutions to Indian problems. Yes, we are learning from the world. We will speak about engagement. India today has signed 13 FTAs. We are closely engaging with the UK. Hopefully we will sign up very quickly with them. European Union, Canada, and so many others in the pipeline. We are now engaging with our strong trading partners. In fact, very soon we will see that all the G7 nations, perhaps barring USA, we would have an FTA with all of them. This is the resilience of India. This is a plan. This is the clear focus of India, that we need to engage with the world. Why? Because India needs to do that. Not because we are competing with some other nation.
May I sort of ask you about how, so one of the sort of binding constraints for us has been our fiscal situation, and that has prevented us from doing a lot of things. How do you see that evolving? Are we sort of consolidating at the right pace? And do you, sir, if you could just give us a broad picture of how the global political and consequently economic scenario looks like over the next 3 years, especially Europe, China, and the US and beyond.
Okay. In terms of revenues, okay, let me split the answer up into a couple of components. The first big elephant in the room always is GST. The goods and services tax, and I think we've been doing very well in the last 2 years in terms of revenue mobilization through GST. So that is a short-term success. Why do I call it short-term success? For 2 reasons. One is that we have a very complex structure of GST in place. It has 5 rates. And the 5 rates plus the surcharges doesn't make it the best, most easy system to work with. We can tell a story about how it addresses the needs of our of India, as Mr. Singh said, and I don't agree with you on that. So we need to rejig in our minds what is the role of taxation. And the role of taxation is not to do everything else. The primary role of taxation is to collect revenues. So we have to gradually work towards trying to reduce the number of rate categories. I'm still not commenting about whether we should have a 28 or not, but we need a fewer rate slabs. Those reduce conflicts, those reduce potentially misclassification and all of those challenges. So that is something, and importantly, that is something the country committed. The GST Council committed to the country when GST was introduced. Let's start here, but we will modify. So that is one element in this whole story that I think we should be working on. Why is it important? Because GST is become one major source of revenue for the states, but they have zero autonomy there. So for states to be told that now, go and work on excise, but let's try and harmonize. The narrative tends to become less and less autonomy. We do say that our people live in the states, but states are more dependent on consensus norms of functioning. So there is some work to be done on how to strengthen this process of some competition among states to get a little more traction. So that's on GST. The most buoyant source at the moment is in personal income tax, and that's a great story. Corporate taxes are not doing so well as personal income tax is doing at the moment, which is a little surprising because I thought corporate incomes were doing very well. So there is this disconnect between you have profits but you don't have taxes. And we need to, as economists, and I think people need to worry about why that's happening. That's a separate question.
Are they dodging? Are they dodging?
That's a question to be answered, right? So on personal income tax, and this is my pet peeve, so since you've given me the opportunity, I will air it. My pet peeve is in personal income tax, the complaint we have always is that too few people pay taxes. But at every strategic moment, we increase our exemption threshold and effectively bring fewer people in. So, to ask ourselves a very simple question on if you're earning income of 5 lakhs, do you have the ability of paying a tax of, let's say, 2,000 rupees? It's not a big amount, but it changes the narrative of how people think about taxes. So do we need to raise exemption thresholds all the time, or can we keep them steady for some time? That is a question that we need to be asking ourselves. We also go back to saying, will people hold governments accountable if they are not all paying tax? If we keep telling this narrative that only 3% of Indians pay tax or only 4%, okay, 5%, but that's it. Then we are always telling a narrative of a country of evaders and avoiders. And let's be a little more fair to our citizens. Let's try and change the narrative. So that is by way of taxes. State taxes are a challenge. We need to work more on making these tax collections a little more robust. Now they are very, very volatile for most states. So that is what I believe in. Big question, will we increase from a 17.5% tax to GDP ratio to a 20%? We might creep up, we are not leapfrogging it.
Mr. Barua, if I can put that same question to you, do you see the revenue growth moderating going ahead because of the global spillover impacts?
Yes, I think there would be some moderation in nominal GDP growth. Inflation is coming down, so is growth. It's likely to sort of moderate next year. So you will have a problem with the so-called top line of the economy, and that should translate to lower rate of tax collection. So that is certainly a challenge, but there are a lot of things that can be done to fix that.
Professor Menon, you can please ask. You go ahead.
You asked me what sounds like a simple question. It's really a hardest question to answer. But the fact is, nobody can predict the future. What you can do is you set up scenarios and ascribe probability to the likelihood, right? And that's what we did professionally. So what are the extreme scenarios? One is peace and development, that life goes on wonderful, the economy keeps growing, etc. I don't think anybody in this room expects that. The other extreme, which people actually have been talking about much more now, is a great power conflict. I myself actually don't think conflict between the great powers themselves is likely. Because, as I said, we are not in a Cold War situation. They are joined at the hip. Economically, you can't contemplate this. The only real risk of that is if both China and the US think they have peaked. If they think today that they peaked, then they have a very strong incentive to fix things now. For China to take Taiwan, say, make a bid. Right. But honestly, I don't see that as likely, because China cannot afford to try to take Taiwan and fail. That would be the end of Xi Jinping and probably of the Communist Party's rule. And therefore, there's built-in incentive. So I would put the probability of that extreme, great power conflict. That doesn't mean that you won't have civil wars, you won't have interference, you won't have all the other things going on, and that flashpoints won't stay live. But there'll be a lot of sharp elbows and pushing and shoving and kicking under the table, but not direct war or conflict between the great powers. That leaves a whole host of scenarios in between, which get increasingly likely. So for me, the real risk is, we are assuming that human beings are rational, right? Economists always assume, we sometimes assume. Yeah? But I think this is the problem. we don't know whether people will function rationally according to our idea of what rational actors are supposed to do. But also that the rise of China has dislocated the balance of power so much in Asia that you now have every hotspot around in maritime Asia is live, whether it's East China Sea, Taiwan, South China Sea, Korea. I mean, why did North Korea develop nuclear weapons? It's a declaration of independence from China and making sure they can't sell them out to the Americans or to the South Koreans, and so on. And look at the Himalayas, I mean, they're live. And the risk there is that these things escalate, that people can't actually figure out how to deal with them. And this is why I say we're in for a dangerous decade, I would say, because and the real risk is, it seems to me, two things from China. One is once you reveal ambition, even if you try and dial it back, you can't. Everybody's going to assume that you are very ambitious. And they've made it clear they want to be number one in the world. The other problem is the long-term factors, what you mentioned, demography, etc. If they're in a hurry, then they can precipitate trouble. But so can the US, if they think the future is not theirs. And this is why I say, now each one will try and improve their position vis-a-vis the other, and that will drive geopolitics. For us, the problem is that the Cold War, at least the center of it, was in Europe. It was far away from us. Today, we are right next to the vortex of where this happens. So we can't help but be part of it. Today, what the Americans and the Chinese are courting Nepal. China is involved in Nepalese politics. Why? I mean, during the Cold War, they didn't care what happened in South Asia. And frankly, it left you the freedom to do much more than... Today, you have to step your game up in South Asia to an extent, and it's in your interest, even though it might not be a great economic gain, to make sure that your periphery stays peaceful and that they rise with you. And yet, you have a poly-crisis in South Asia. You look at the economies around us. So you have to, in a sense, shift to deal with all these intermediate scenarios, short of full-fledged conflict, and you can't count on the international system. There is no international system because the multilateral system is based on member states. And today, this is an era of great power rivalry. If the member states are quarreling, how can the system work? And to expect the UN or anybody to do your work, G20, whatever it is, you haven't had a binding international agreement on anything for a decade and a half. People say Paris is a wonderful agreement on climate. What did it amount to? Each country said, I will tell you what I will do, but you have no right to check on what I do. This is an agreement? So the problem here is you can't rely on the rest. You can't rely on the international system, and you have to be prepared for a very high level of uncertainty in the in-between scenarios. Now, those you can, this is a matter of detail.
Just one quick question, sir. What about the possibility of substantial cut in American funding to NATO? And would that be a flashpoint in Europe with Russia kind of expanding its sort of
Trump has threatened this earlier. We've survived Trump 1. India probably survived Trump better than most countries. I don't see why we shouldn't survive Trump 2 either. The beauty of the US, for me, is that it's designed to fail. It was designed by people who didn't trust power and government concentrated. It was against the tyrant, right? So, even if the White House is totally dysfunctional, you can still go to a governor in a state, you can go to Wall Street, you can go somewhere else. If State Department doesn't do your work, you go to the Pentagon. It's checks and balances work for you. And this is why the US has survived losing every single war they've got into since World War II, why they've remade themselves 5 times in my lifetime. I first went to the US in '64. Everyone wrote off the country. They had the president assassinated, civil rights, riots in the streets, Vietnam War, you name it. Everyone said, finished, the US is over. But so in a sense, it's designed for failure in various ways. And that for me is, so I'm less worried actually about that. Now maybe this time around it's different.
We are literally very short of time. I would like to ask one last question. Despite all the geopolitical events that we are seeing, and there is anticipation of slowdown in the advanced economies, Mr. Barua, if you can come in over there. The RBI has in fact revised the GDP estimate, GDP growth estimate upwards to 7%. How do you see it in the next financial year going ahead?
I think about roughly between 6 and 6.5%, depending. We're still not sure where the US is headed. It could be hopefully a soft landing, or it could be a sort of a semi-recession. That would have some spillover effect, exports and so forth. We do have considerable domestic resilience, so we sort of bottom out at around 6%, and I think in the best case, given that we have a strong base this fiscal year, we will do about 6.5%, which is really quite impressive by global standards.
Mr. Singh, what is your estimate for the next financial year?
I'm not going to argue with the economists. I'm happy with whatever figure they got, because I think India is on a solid path. Yes, there are pitfalls. We are looking at them, but right now we are in a sweet spot.
Dr. Rao?
I'm not sure we should really be worrying about the growth accounting story. We will continue to be a strong economy. There are friends who believe that in a couple of years we'll hit 8%. I believe 6 is an assured. Everything above is success. And 6.5, if the world economy really slows down as we keep anticipating, will be what I think we'd see. Will the US Fed really reduce rates? Will our RBI reduce rates? Story can change.
Right now, US, Europe, many other countries have forcibly lowered their growth. Policy-induced slowdown is at work around the world. I don't think the Ukraine war is going to last much longer. Even if it is, it will not consume people's energies and resources the way it has in the last couple of years. And I think the policy reversal in the US will allow the rest of the world also to recalibrate their monetary policy, be a more relaxed stance, and we should see faster growth.
Again, space. Space is becoming a strategic point. How will we ensure that there will be satellites don't collide in space? Elon Musk himself is launching thousands, tens of thousands of satellites into outer space. Lower Earth orbit. So will China. So will India. And how are we regulated? How do we ensure that debris from satellites don't destroy other people's infrastructure? On all these problems, we need cooperation among the major powers. And we will play a role in this if you are alive to these possibilities and if our industry has a capability. The government cannot be capable without industry playing along. After all, what is the government? The industry must have the imagination, the foresight, and the capability. The government can help. So it is up to people like you.
Excuse me.
When we talk about the resilience of the Indian economy, we cannot ignore the agri sector. And particularly when the 45% of the labor force is required in the agri section. On one side, I'll take up the point of the money is there, but it is to be utilized properly. And there, the entrepreneurship is to play a big role. Startup is only one part of the entrepreneurship. So, agronomy, the labor force, and the entrepreneurship.
In fact, highlighted the priorities absolutely correctly, and that's true. India continues to be an economy which is dominated by agriculture. It has absorbed most of our employment, and yes, there is much to do in this area. That is true. Whatever you have mentioned is absolutely something which we are actually focused on. And no, the answers are not simple. They will take time to come. We are trying to come up with a solution like India Stack, but they may or may not really have an immediate impact. But the biggest challenges, which I don't know whether you have pointed it out, I am sorry, I was distracted and didn't get it, is the challenges which we are facing, which this government is addressing. Now, because of the climatic changes, the wheat rice cycle, which really has stood us in such good measure all this while, is not sustainable. It's not sustainable, something which we can do. The MSP structure will undergo a change when we bring in more millets, rather what we call Shri Ann. The idea is that why are we promoting this? Not just for health reasons, but more importantly for the health of our economy. There are vast tracts which can grow millets. So the cropping pattern, the food pattern has to change. Punjab, I come from that state, I can tell you. People sitting here in the, experiencing the smoke because of this burning. The farmers, they don't do it because they want to do it. It's because of the changing water table that the cropping period has been pushed to the monsoons, and so no more can they plant their crops, the second crop in June. So the harvest has been delayed. Now they need to replant quickly. So there are a lot of imperatives. So you are right. These changes which came, these systems which were established sometime in the 60s, now in the past 40-50 years, the change has to be brought. It will not be done overnight, but yes, we are confident that there will be a resolution to this, not in the immediate future, but definitely the midterm. And yes, urbanization and as we industrialize more and more, instead of our young people going abroad to look for jobs, we will increasingly be having those jobs created here, provided, like Nalinji mentioned very clearly, we have the appropriate skills development centers here. We have, so this is where I think, like Mr. Arun mentioned very clearly, this, thank you for PhD chamber, they should really push for this. We need the industry to set up. Please step up. We have many examples of many industries adopting the curricula of NIITs, ITIs, telling the colleges what has to be done, what kind of skills do they need for their factories. Now, I have a young man here from the JK paper, not wrong, we have a factory in Taloba. No? Okay. So I mean, mixed with some other, there was a paper plant there. Now, that's a rural area in Maharashtra. Now, there is also an ITI which is very close by, in Nagpur and other states. Can we, for example, set up an arrangement by which the local ITIs can be told, look, this is the kind of skills I have. I've got 500 jobs in this factory, but I need the following skill sets. So we need the industry to really come up and tell and engage more powerfully in this skilling. So that is where the jobs will come. Right? And that is how we will have a move from people from agriculture to industry, and therefore more rapid growth. I hope that
My name is Vineet Nahata. I'm from Powertail Treasuries. We do treasury management for corporates, pension funds, etc. I would like to bring to the notice of the House that the Indian sovereign debt markets and the Indian corporate markets happen to be in a very sweet spot. We have been included in the global JP Morgan Sovereign Global Bond Index. We are going to receive around $23 billion into Indian sovereign securities in the next year. We just missed being included in the Bloomberg Index also because of certain technical reasons. Going forward, we see that the Indian corporates and the Indian public sector is going to see an era of lower cost of capital and mega fundraising. One area where there's a big opportunity for Indian corporates, PSUs as well as the private sector is the green bonds. We had an issuance of sovereign green bond. Unfortunately, there is not much interest shown. It did not take off well. There is a big reason for that. There are no tax SOPs or incentives which are attached to the interest which is earned by these sovereign green bonds. even in the private sector, the banks or the private investors, they don't derive any taxation benefit, and the interest rates are lower than what they are getting. The same corporate, if it borrows at 8%, the green bonds, he might borrow at 7.5%, but the investor doesn't have any benefit. Why should he invest in these sovereign green bonds? So if a taxation shock or an incentive can be allocated or given to investors for investing in these, it is going to be a great step. So this was one observation which I would like to be highlighted. The other thing is that our currency against dollar index has declined over the last 1.5 months from 106 to 102. US 10-year has gone down from 504 to 3.94. Our Indian 10-year government securities has only gone down 7.3 to 7.16. So dollar depreciating in future, what is the main reason, what is holding back? There is a tough resistance rupee is facing against dollar.
Request our chair, Shri Shashwat Maniji, to present a memento to our chief guest, Shri Sanjeet Singh ji.
Respected chief guest, Shri Sanjeet Singh, esteemed panelists, Dr. K. Kavita Rao, Shri Abhik Parwa, who was with us, Dr. Nagesh Kumar, Shri T.K. Arun, Shri Shiv Shankar Menon, Shri Shashwat Samani, Ms. Meghna Mittala, moderator, Dr. Ranjit Mehta, who is with us, and Dr. S.P. Sharma. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of the PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry. The world has been struggling with a string of relentless challenges since 2020. Although the COVID-19 pandemic is now a distant memory, frequent geopolitical ruptures, first with the Russia-Ukraine war, and now the Israel-Hamas conflict, have engulfed the global economy. International trade, which was already stalling with the US-China trade conflicts and Brexit, now faces additional headwinds. While the US economy is showing continued resilience, most other advanced economies, particularly in Europe, are facing a downturn. China's growth engine has also stalled. As our panelists have highlighted, this may push global growth well below the historical average. Amid such global uncertainty, the Indian economy is a splendid example of resilience, showing the world what results are possible when economic foundations are strong and government policies are growth-oriented. India's GDP growth of 7.6% in the latest quarter has been by far the highest among major economies. Global growth may increasingly come from India, and with 6.5% growth, maybe even more, as some panelists mentioned, expected over the next 5 years, India may surpass Japan and Germany to become the world's third largest economy. Our government has shown a remarkable ability to skillfully navigate the global geopolitical and diplomatic landscape to strengthen India's economic position. As we have heard today, the PLI scheme has been tailored to leverage the US-China trade conflicts and global China Plus One strategy. Dedicated freight corridors and our government's sustained infrastructure capex, as speakers have highlighted, can bring jobs to the millions entering the workforce and reduce logistics costs. We have heard about India's homegrown digital stack. We have heard about India's leadership in the energy transition, particularly in the solar space, about fiscal reforms and many FTAs which are there in the pipeline. Collectively, such initiatives will improve India's manufacturing competitiveness and can cement India's place in global manufacturing supply chains. We have also heard about some areas which may need more attention both from policy and industry, especially human capital development. With turbulence in China, stakes are high to find another engine to propel global economic growth and create a multipolar world, an opportunity which India is well positioned to take up. Our esteemed speakers today included some of India's senior-most economists, policymakers, diplomats, and journalists. It is not every day that we have the privilege of hearing from such sharp minds, that too in conversation, and having them discuss the nuances of the global geopolitical context with such crystal clarity. Because thought-provoking insights to capitalize on these opportunities and play our small part in creating a strong and capable economy with strategic autonomy. I would also like to thank our dear guests for sparing time to grace this occasion and enriching it with your engagement. And finally, I convey my deepest regards to all those who have been working tirelessly behind the scenes to make this event possible. Thank you very much.
Request our Chair of the Economic Affairs Committee, Shri Shashwat Somani ji, to present memento to our Chief Guest, Shri Sanjeet Singh ji.
Thank you very much. Indeed done. So.
Our managing committee members, we thank you all for participating and sparing your invaluable time in today's environment, and we look forward that you come every time in our discussions, in our policy advocacy, in our programs to discuss various issues which are relevant for the Indian economy.